They have nerfed the lovable Sword Dog from Sword and Shield, and I am a little upset about it. I'm going to be honest, I love this Pokemon back in Sword and Shield, so seeing it get the nerf kind of hurt, but I understand why they did it. We're going to quickly talk about Zacian, what it does as a Pokemon for you guys, then we'll get into some main sets, as we always do with these guides. But to start things off, guys, first off, like I said, they nerfed it. They took it from 170 attack to base 150 attack. Not the end of the world. You still have a base 150 attack stat. It is going to be strong in Regulation G. Not quite as used as it was before, but you're still going to be able to get some good wins and some good games in while you have Zacian as your restricted, right? They also nerfed Intrepid Sword, which is its ability, meaning you cannot, now it only activates once per battle. Back in Sword and Shield, this was actually like an Ogre Pawn ability, where you could switch it in and out, and every single time you hit the field, you would get that boost. So basically, if I was on the field, I got my attack boost from a Intrepid Sword, I could switch out, come back in, and Intrepid Sword would activate again. That no longer happens. It only activates the first time I hit the field, which is a tad bit unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. It's still a very, very strong ability and a very, very strong Pokemon. Just kind of means you can't really balance around as simply. Positioning is going to be a lot more key when you're trying to pilot this piece now, right? But you also get crazy moves with Behemoth Blade, Play Rough that everybody loves to miss so often, Sacred Sword, and then you get a lot of coverage as well. We'll go into that in a sec. But Fairy Steel is a busted typing. I forgot to mention that. Fairy Steel, absolutely broken typing, and it only gets better when you're able to be a Fairy Steel type and have a defensive typing on top of being a Fairy Steel type. So it feels pretty good. We'll talk about Terra types and all that as we get into the sets. But for right now, we also get moves like Wild Charge. You get moves like Close Combat if you want more damage than a Sacred Sword. Crunch is kind of cool, right? Fire Fang, I wouldn't recommend, but it's there, right? You get Wild Charge. I think I already mentioned it, right? There is some cool options for you. Now, just before I get into things, I do want to mention for anybody in-game that is looking for the move Behemoth Blade, this is Iron Head. What happens and how Zacian works is you teach the Pokemon Iron Head, and when it is holding the sword, upon entering battle, you become your crown form, and Iron Head becomes Behemoth Blade. There is no actual move Behemoth Blade. It's just when you're holding the sword, Iron Head becomes Behemoth Blade. I feel like there's always some confusion on that, so I figured I'd mention it. But regardless, you get really, really good attacks to balance off your Fairy Steel. Really, really good Fairy Steel typing. You've got pretty solid stats as well. Like, you're not frail by any means at 115, right? So it still feels like a pretty good Pokemon. We're going to go into these sets right now, guys. And as always with the sets, feel free to interchange between the sets. These are starting points. These are kind of like general concepts I'm talking about with these Pokemon, just to give you guys a starting point, maybe hitting one or two calcs, and then you guys can figure it out from there, right? Like if we decide we like the Pokemon after trying it a little bit, we can modify a little, right? I go with the benchmarks here, especially because it's an early regulation guide. Things are going to change as the meta develops, but more importantly, let's jump into things here. This is your standard dog. This is what you're going to see more often than not, and it's going to be Behemoth Blade, Play Rough, or Sacred Sword, and then probably some sort of setup move, either Swords Dance or Substitute, I think are the two front runners right now. Or you're just going to see 3 attacks, right? You can just go Behemoth Blade, Play Rough, and Sacred Sword and call it a day. You don't necessarily need to be able to set up, but I think being able to set up with a Swords Dance is something that is uncalled, like it's not, I think it's untalked about. Like it's a very, very strong option, but I think there's a lot of people who's actually still just clicking the 3 attacks, and having the Swords Dance is a good way to make up for the fact that you have to switch in and out, right? Like when you switch in and out and you lose your attack stat, now I can get Swords Dance. Or maybe I won't have to switch out because, yeah, they're going to intimidate me, but I just earned that back with a Swords Dance, right? It feels like a very strong option on Zacian. You don't necessarily need more than 2 moves, especially because a lot of the times I find myself pairing this with like an Urshifu. If I'm pairing this with an Urshifu, do I really need fighting coverage from Sacred Sword? Maybe not, but that's team dependent, right? Do I really need Play Rough if I have this thing maybe beside a Flutter Mane? Once again, team dependent, but you probably can get away a lot of the time with either a Swords Dance or a Substitute, some sort of support move here. And on an option on a team like this, on a build like this, and you're just sending damage, because why not just send damage with this Pokemon? The next 2 sets are bulkier. They do have a little bit better coverage, a little bit better bulk on them. But for right now, I figured I'd start general and start basic, because you don't really need to do much more than max here, right? You can just kind of send some damage, get your damage off in game a little bit, and I have 0 issues with a set like this for a Pokemon like this. Terra type on an offensive set like this, Fairy is very cool. I think Stellar is also very cool, and there's nothing really wrong with Steel. Now, steel you're probably not going to see a lot because a lot of the times there's going to be fire type attacks or ground type attacks that you're trying to get away from. So you're not going to see steel too much. However, just sending steel and just sending behemoth blade, behemoth blade, behemoth blade is something that's cool in concept, but I don't think you're going to really utilize it. But on an offensive build like this, I do think Stellar or Terra Fairy to really boost those play roughs. We've seen it work for Flutter mains, and I think it will work just fine with Zacian on an offensive set. So keep that in mind. You can play around with the Terra type, of course. But other than this, what I want to talk about is now set 2. There is nothing between the speed stats of 220 and 207. Right? At 220, I am not outpacing the Calorexes anyways. There's no point in being that fast, in my opinion. So I drop it down. I go down to 207. Iron Bundle hits 206 before it gets its Quark Drive boost, so I might as well outspeed that. That's kind of what this speed stat is hitting. That's what this speed stat is here for, and it feels pretty good to sit at, right? Now, I wasn't able to add as much bulk as I would have liked to this Zacian on build number 2. However, it's still bulky. You can still get away switching to maybe like a Terra Water and getting those defenses a little bit back for you. Now you wall out Kyogre pretty well. Maybe you want to run a Wild Charge on this team. If you are going to go Water, maybe you go Substitute, right? Tons of options. Like I said, you can interchange what set 1, set 2 are, right? The moveset doesn't really change too much, but you can definitely play around with it to fit the team the best, right? And one thing I want to talk about and why I couldn't really get away with more bulk on this Jolly Zacian build is back in Sword and Shield, when you had base 170 attack, you could lower your attack stat on a Jolly build and still get the clean one-shot on Calyrex Ice. You already, at base 150 attack, Calyrex Ice is already only dying 87% of the time to your Behemoth Blade. And I would use Zacian because I'm trying to remove Calyrex Ice from the field. That is one of the Pokemon that I think Zacian actually matches up pretty well into, and it gives you a very balanced matchup versus Trick Room. So I don't really want to lower this chance of getting that knockout any more than I need to. So I didn't really get the calcs I wanted. I could try to invest these numbers in a little bit of a more aggressive way, right? And try to fine tune for a calc. But everything I was looking at, like I would modify, it would be like, oh, I still have a chance to die 12% of the time. Or, oh, this really doesn't help the bulk all that much. So I decided to toss this one as a generalized bulk because I can't take it out of attack anymore. So I threw the bulk into the general area, so I'm living physical and special hits that maybe aren't as refined or as fine-tuned as what I would want them to necessarily be. However, it's still a very nice, it's a bulkier build. There's nothing between 207 and 220, so there's no point in not being 207 on this build and getting a little bit more bulk and becoming a little bit more defensive. So I think this is a very valid build as well if you're wanting to go Jolly. Now, Adamant Zacian is really, really strong because it allows me to be bulkier. Now, you do sacrifice a lot by going Adamant. You have the likes of Koraidon, Miraidon, Fluttermane, and everything that can potentially be sitting at that 205 mark that are now potentially going to outspeed you, which is not fun. Don't get me wrong. However, I think the bulk you get from making this trade-off is very, very strong to me, right? You not only get more attack, which is base 150, which now basically one-shots to Calyrex. You don't have to rely on that 87% roll anymore. I will take that every single time. Thank you very much. I will always take that if I can get it, right? I now get more bulk, and this calc is actually for +1 Astral Barrage from Life Orb Cali Shadow. You now live. And that seems very, very strong to me, right? That was the one calc that this is for. I'm sure there's other calcs. I'm sure you can fine-tune it a little bit better. But once again, Cali Shadow is one of the few restrictions that is faster than me, and having the generalized bulk feels pretty good. Now, like I said, you do lose the trade-off on speed. You could technically go lower as well, but I figured I'd outpace like an Iron Bundle. Sorry, not an Iron Bundle, Iron Boulder. I outpace like an Iron Boulder with this set. There's nothing really crazy. I also get a busted defensive Terra, and if you guys have been playing the game for a while, there's those cores that you like to play, right? Those cores that you generally see on teams. And you got the Fire, Water, Grass cores. You've got your Dragon, Fairy, Steel cores. I don't like talking a lot about these, right? But they're there for a reason, and they're strong for a reason. And when I have a Fairy Steel type and I can turn it into a Dragon type, I'm not going to argue that more often than not, right? That is technically an entire core that you'd normally build with 3 Pokemon in 1 Pokemon. Now, granted, it's a little bit of a knockoff thing because like you are trading your typings around, right, with the Terra, but it's a very strong defensive option on Zacian, and I really, really wanted to talk about it, and I don't think it's being utilized enough from what I've seen as teams that have been doing decently well in tours. I think it's a very strong option. You get to resist your fire still. You get to resist uh, uh, ground. I don't know why. Sorry, my brain broke. You don't resist ground. Yeah, no, my brain broke, guys. But you get to resist your fire. You get to resist the water from the Kyogres. You get to do a lot. The one thing I don't like about the dragon is you lose to the Calyrex. Now, if you're gonna try and tear it in the Calyrex matchup, it's not as strong as something like water is in that Calyrex ice matchup. However, I do think dragon is pretty valid. I don't mind it. I think it's a cool concept. I think it should be looked into. But like I said, you can play around. You can just say I'm gonna outpace Adamant Zacian. Sorry, Adamant Shenpao, right? And that hits 187, so you would sit at 188, and now you have even more bulk, right? I don't know where you'd go with this, right? Maybe you want to do this, and you can probably live Groudon Precipice Blades. I mean, right here, I think it's a 4... At 156 Adamant, I think they only have a 25% chance to take you out. So maybe jumping it up to like 36 or 44 will allow you to always live that. That could be something to trade that speed stat for. But I did like sitting around 194. It's very similar to what I had my Fluttermane sitting at. And I'm very comfortable with that speed stat on my big offensive attackers. And I don't know whether that's going to hold up in the format. But like I said, the concept of this Zacian was go Adamant, sacrifice a little bit of speed for a little bit more attack, a little bit more bulk, and it feels really, really strong. Now, granted, what else you could do, if you were okay with the 87% roll on the Cali Ice, right? You can drop this down to 108. You're sitting at the exact same stat that you had when you were Jolly max attack, which feels pretty good. And now you're actually capable of going, once again, that same concept with the bulk, still keeping a little bit of a faster, so you're not sacrificing as much speed, right? And then you hit the 108. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of options to build this Pokemon bulkier. This is what I would recommend to start because I see a clear advantage by doing it this way at Adamant 156, right? And that clear advantage is now I'm one-shotting the Calyrex Ices as long as I'm at +1. And I still have a decent chunk of speed, still get my Calyrex Shadow Calcs that I was looking for, and it feels pretty good, right? But there is nothing wrong with set 2. I think 207 is probably a very comfy speed stat, right? It's probably the better way to run this Pokemon, especially if you are running a Swords Dance variant. I think if you're running a Swords Dance variant, this is probably where you want to sit, because then you can Swords Dance, and you don't have to worry about finding out the speed tier between yourself and, let's just say, an Iron Bundle, right? You know you're going to outpace that Iron Bundle as long as the Quark Drive isn't active. And if that's the case for me, I can get to +2, and then I know I'm comfortable, you know? I can outpace Koraidons, Miraidons, and I know I'm just going to be faster than them, right? And knowing I'm going to be faster than those pieces feels incredible sometimes, right? Especially on a Swords Dance variant, where you get the +2, and then you just start doing damage before they're even able to chip you down. Set 3, I think, is a little bit better suited for like those bulkier teams. Maybe if you have some speed control with like a Tailwind. Maybe if you want to play a lot more passive with like a substitute as well. Now, I think there's merit to Swords Dance on a set like this as well if you're okay sacrificing the speed. But once again, I like set 2. I like set 3. I think both are strong. And I have to talk about this spread. I don't have to. If I do not bring up Zacian Hero Form, there are going to be 20 people in my comment section going, hey, this is a Zacian guide. What about Zacian Hero Form? Guys, I just don't like it. Okay? I just genuinely do not like it. I don't think it's good by any means. It's just not it. You do get ability to hold a different item. You get Play Rough, Iron Head. You can probably go Terra Steel to become a Fairy Steel type. The knockoff way. You get to go Clear Amulet if you wanted to. I just don't know why you'd ever run this instead of the other Zacian. You are a little bit slower, so you have to go Jolly Jolly almost max to hit that 207 speed stat, right? The only benefit you get is you're holding a Clear Amulet now and you can't get intimidated. That just doesn't feel like a worthy trade-off to me. So I don't think this set is going anywhere. But it's funny. I had to mention it before anybody yelled at me. But like I said, guys, set 2, set 3, probably very, very strong. For Zacian, feel free to interchange some of the ideas between all these sets, as always with these videos. And guys, as always, if you guys do enjoy videos like this, feel free to like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel, and of course, I really do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to get on out of here. I'm going to stop rambling about this sword dog now, and I will catch you all in a future video.